All right, hello. My name is Jonathan LeMaster-Smith. I am affiliate faculty at Sioux Falls Seminary in South Dakota. I adjunct regularly for Garrett-Evangelical and teach here or there for other schools. And I live in North Carolina. And along with my formal teaching, proceeding and alongside the events of General Conference 2019, I was also teaching a series of district-level retreats focusing on United Methodist studies for people in my district. And during these retreats and in most other places I have taught anything about Methodism, I have received the question, why has no one taught us this? And alongside of that, I've received statements like, you're the first person who told us any of this, around issues of General Conference, around the church's beliefs on things, and those kind of outgrowths of that. And in my second iteration of these retreats, a lifelong Methodist came up following the eventful annual conference season we had. And she's a student in my class from a rural church. And she said, up until this year, I never realized how much we didn't matter. She was referring to the small rural churches that dot the landscape of most, if not all, of our annual conferences. And she witnessed an election of delegates to the 2020 General Conference that was mostly, if not entirely, from larger urban suburban churches, the praising of the larger, wealthy urban suburban churches, and the closing of 13 mostly rural churches. This statement is not surprising, but it's nonetheless heartbreaking. Research into economics, education, and media observe a continual treatment of our rural communities as places for educational systems, corporations, and media outlets to harvest resources, be that raw materials, cheap labor, gifted students, or stereotypical characters. Think Duck Dynasty or Andy Griffith, those kind of characters. And they leave behind the non-useful, non-profitable leftovers, what education scholar Jerry Johnson will call local losers, or what Henry Giroux will call disposable people. Within this student statement suggests that she, and I believe others, will believe that rural churches are considered disposable to the greater United Methodist denomination. Many rural communities still, at the same time, radiate this desire to learn, serve, and engage with the concerns and mission of the greater United Methodist Church when given the opportunity. Yet our traditional means of disseminating information and knowledge and resources from what I'm going to call central hubs, such as the seminary to the pastor to the parishioner, or the annual conference general agency to the local pastor or layperson to the church, don't work. They fail us. One example of this is many of our annual conferences worked very hard to try to get the information about the Commission on the Way Forward out to our local churches. And they did so by holding listening sessions, talking sessions, putting it all online. I have members of my congregation who don't have internet because they can't get it where they are. And secondly, in our rural districts, I'm in fairly small districts, but they still have to drive over an hour to an hour and a half to get to the meetings. Others have to drive upwards of 5 hours to get to any sort of district activities. So, alongside this, there appears to be a national assumption that rural communities, and by default churches, are ethnically homogenous. They are monolithically conservative and or disinterested in the happenings outside of their communities. Yet most of our rural communities have diverse populations with varying theological and political opinions. These aging systems of information distribution and faulty assumptions do a disservice to the United Methodist Church, particularly those churches in our rural communities who long to be vibrant and connected to the rest of their denomination. Therefore, in order for United Methodism to move towards more inclusive, connectional, and global future that includes Methodist in rural parts of the United States and beyond, it must intentionally work to decenter its educational practices. It must reorient its economic values and invest in intentional conversations in the backroads of our connections. Part of this work includes an intentional exploration of rural values and ways of knowing, particularly latent rural values like Michael Corbett might suggest as a way of making do with what you have, or what Tech Sample will say that we are more into gatherings than task forces, and looking at a value of creative stewardship over vital statistics and financial success. So first I want to explore the rural decentering of educational practices. So when I say decentering, I mean the relocating of educational spaces and processes. Even though I teach Methodist studies, I'm actually a Christian education scholar is my background. We cannot assume that education and information trickles down the connection to rural communities, which are often at the end of the line. Historically, Methodists have created non-traditional spaces of worship, education, and formation through things like the camp meetings, revivals, class meetings, and then the early days of the Sunday school programs. And so instead of assuming our conferences, our seminaries, and our general agencies can or will spread information from the center of the connection outward, we must look at creating sources and spaces for education within our denomination. Particularly for rural communities, I suggest sending out scholars and experts into the rural communities to be itinerant circuit riders of education and information. I'll be starting my third rotation of my United Methodist Studies retreats, and they keep growing in numbers. I have a mix of people, diverse in age, increasingly African American. I've had over half African American in 3 of my 6 retreats so far. Men and women. They include lay people, clergy in our annual conference who just want to renew it because they feel like they need to reconnect with it, as well as people who are in the process of working on their paperwork for commissioning ordination, alongside of people who are also working to transfer into our denomination and learn about Methodism. As these weekend gatherings, they're not simply information processes. They are designed to provide times for fellowship and exploring of our personal and church histories alongside the future of our community. So instead of simply providing information, here, read this book, take this test, traditional education model that they would be used to, it provides a space for them to ask, where have we been? What are we doing? And how can these new resources and relationships help us? This utilization of space allows for participants to find relevant connections with the history, theology, and structure of Methodism, and to discern how these components of our tradition can impact our communities. Another means of decentering is to educate and empower the pastors and lay leadership to learn, teach, and connect in ways relevant to their communities. Clergy and laity are often anxious about encountering delicate issues. They want to, but they're still anxious about it. And they want someone to mentor and empower them to do so on a regular basis. Both our class leader models and of checking in with group members, connecting and reporting, along with the Sunday school model of having regular trainings for the teachers to continue to grow in their ability to teach and engage, might provide us with something useful here. Just as some of our annual conferences have cohorts, they have preaching, teaching, youth ministry, those sort of things. Why not have Methodist studies cohorts or cohorts on how to teach people to engage in delicate issues within their congregations that provide relevant ways of doing this in spaces that are of value to them. Also making sure these are not held just in our urban centers, but held in our context of churches across the annual conference. Don't expect everyone to drive 3 hours to the center of the annual conference for that, but to hold these in different spaces. This includes helping churches not simply to gain information, but to adapt knowledge and resources to their settings and to explore their own stories and futures in relation to global Methodism, whatever is to come. So moving on from that, I also talk about reorienting of our financial values as crucial for the sake of the rural churches in the wake of the 2019 General Conferences. Many of our churches continually struggle with finances. I don't think I know of a church that's not dealing with finances in some way, hoping that they can pay their pastor and their boiler survives the winter. However, in small rural communities, they also struggle not simply with the anxiety around the money they have, but around the money they don't have. The way in which money is a sign of success for much of the rest of the church, as well as for our society. So presently, under our current exit plan, we've set up a situation where a church wishing to leave the denomination must pay unfunded pension liabilities and other financial costs as determined by the annual conference. While there are stories of churches intentionally holding debt and trying to get around this system, most churches are generally working to pay their expected contributions and then expecting the local church to pay tens of thousands of dollars to disaffiliate will likely leave a bitter taste in the mouth for the churches who choose to stay and the churches who choose to leave, whether they're progressive or conservative. And it may also trap churches within a system they disagree with that can lead to toxicity on both sides because they're forced to pay exit fees or show they're successful enough to leave us. So our denomination needs a new model of gracious exit that considers the financial realities of our local churches, but more importantly, it needs to reorient a reorientation of its economic values and our understanding of vitality in general that allows for a more equitable contextual reality for churches. Within all of this, value needs to be placed on grace, discipleship, and less on exit strategies and financial scarcities related to the future of the church. This change in values, while not solving financial problems, may at least allow churches to make choices outside of financial restrictions. So many of our churches already have to make choices based on financial restrictions, and may even reorient their thinking around success and goals of their church's ministry. This includes a reduction of dependence upon budgets and worship attendance as metrics of success, and more on creative engagement with the realities of their rural contexts. So finally, I want to turn to the Methodist idea of holy conferencing, or of Christian conferencing, that appears regularly in our literature. We've actually talked about it in a couple sessions today. And I agree we need intentional framing of conversations as a means of grace. But still, we tend to do so in a manner that does not take into consideration the realities of cultural differences. Instead of task force and discussion sessions, we need what Text Sample points out as gatherings and events, not these institutional meetings. Holy conferencing has the potential to create new avenues of communication and creation, but it requires far more investment than having chairs in a room and someone speaking. This simply holding informational meetings at a church an hour away or putting everything online will do some good, but it will not do what needs to be done. Some examples include rather regular informal meetings around meals or around tables just to discuss the issues of the church. Events that are less goal-oriented and more imagination and creation-oriented. Maybe we look back at the quarterly conference method of having the mix of revival and information shared all at once together. I remember laity rallies growing up as a child, and the place where information was given out by the district, but also we celebrated the successes of our little churches. Those are one of the few places local rural churches could win prizes because they had the most number of members of their church show up percentage-wise. Because if you have 30 people in worship and you have 20 people show up, you win. Or by working out things like sitting on the porch on Sunday afternoons, or taking walks in the woods and training our clergy and laity to have conversations that matter in these spaces that don't have agendas but have ability to talk and discuss. Our lay leadership crave, from what I've learned, the desire to be equipped with the knowledge to serve their church, to know about their denomination, and to engage with that. My final suggestion is a collective project to work on together, such as serving together, putting on an event, or celebrating a community milestone. Rural churches tend to be goal-oriented in that way, not in the goal of meeting goals, but of working on projects in need. And within those spaces, cooperation, creativity, and relationships all are formed within those spaces. Within these projects, discussions around different issues in life arise, creating space for engagement during the action, and strengthening old relationships and fostering new ones. So as I bring this presentation to a close, I know I don't directly engage the issues of the LGBTQ community or the issues of human sexuality in the church. And presently, in fact, there's not a plethora of research just in general on LGBTQ or queer rural life. There's a few books out there, but there's not a lot to find. Still, I believe our work for justice is tied to the formation of our communities. Queer persons are present in all of our communities, even in our rural churches. We know that. Our work is to provide the resources for conversations and action in ways that people can hear and respond. If Methodism's future is one of inclusion, providing rural churches with the knowledge and resources to act out of creative hope and love will make for homegrown spaces of reconciliation, acceptance, and justice that usher in God's future for the rural church and our global connection. Thank you.